welcome to this Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. As I do every weekend, as it approaches, I begin the program when I'm lucky with John Ellis, editor-in-chief and founder of News Items, because through the course of the week, I begin my day every day with news items. It's always in my email box by 6:30. And John usually sends between 50 and 100 stories a week. But for this segment, he gets it down to 3. Hello, John. Good, happy Friday to you, and I hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. But what are your top 3 stories? What do we start with today?
I think the most important story of the week was actually in the FT today. It concerned a new technology called direct lithium extraction. DLE is the acronym. And if you get in the time machine and go back to 2010, U.S. production of oil and gas was, call it X. By 2020, U.S. oil production had tripled. And the technology that enabled that to occur is called something your viewers are well familiar with, I'm sure. That technology was called fracking. And fracking essentially revolutionized the energy industry, made the U.S. Essentially energy independent, and drastically and dramatically changed our position in energy markets. We were no longer dependent on the Middle East as we had been before. It enabled us to do things like provide liquid natural gas to Europe after Russia invaded Ukraine. So it was a revolution. The question here is whether direct lithium extraction will do the same thing for us in the mining and producing of lithium. Lithium is a critical element of lithium-ion batteries, obviously, and U.S. Need for more and more electricity is only going to grow and grow. So the more lithium we have, the better we will be. Right now, the major producers of lithium are Australia, China, and Chile in that order. The U.S. is not even in the game. If this technology proves out, then we will be in the game. And the good news about it is there are 2 things. One, major U.S. companies are throwing money at this technology, helping it to prove out, if you will. And B, it will be a source of good jobs at good wages with good benefits in the Arkansas, northern Louisiana, Texas, East Texas area. So that's
what I was going to ask.
That's
natural gas helped Ohio and Pennsylvania, North Dakota, and so it's Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas have got the lithium.
Yeah, and a little bit into Missouri, but that's where they think the largest lithium deposits are. So it's something to watch. It certainly captured my attention because, as I said, lithium batteries are, obviously they go in Teslas, but they're important for storage of electricity, on-demand electricity on our grid, for individual data centers, for homes. So it's a huge
Big
technology,
deal.
and if we have the element for it, we'll be in much better shape.
Well, you just mentioned Tesla, which is your second big story. I'm not sure I like this story, John. I'm not sure Optimus robots are for me, but tell the audience about Optimus robots.
Well, Elon Musk has been on a little bit of a PR offensive of late, and he gave a terrific interview, by the way, to David Faber of CNBC, which you can look up by going to YouTube and just typing in those 2 names. But at a conference recently, he announced that they had sort of made a breakthrough in the development of a humanoid robot. And he said, we can build an industry that I'm sorry, wrong one. He said, this is a super big deal, and no invention will even be close to making as big an impact as Optimus. And this is a direct quote. He said, I think it will be 10 times bigger than the next biggest product ever made, like at that level.
Wow.
So if you think about, ordinarily you would say, well, he's just trying to pump Tesla stock or something like that. But I think we're aware that when Elon Musk says we're going to do this, He made Tesla the most valuable automobile company in the world. The Starlink system enables internet access to any place in the world. Neuralink is changing, brain computer interface. And it goes on and on and on. He's done extraordinary work in a number of fields. So there's no reason to doubt that he might be able to do this. And the thing that makes it so extraordinary is when you have a robot, you think, well, you have to program the robot on the automobile manufacturing line to do this task or that. But what makes the Musk robot so extraordinary is that it can learn to do things by watching videos of people doing things. So
John, when you told me that in news items, I thought, don't show them Star Wars. All right, we don't want the Optimists to see Star Wars because they're going to see the droids, right? They're going to see all of those Imperial legions of droids coming at us. So I'm ambivalent about this.
Well, I think you'll be okay, but I don't know if your producer, if they put a video camera on your producer and then the humanoid learns how to do his job, things might not work out.
Well,
anyway,
I'm sorry,
robotics
Dwayne. I'm sorry,
robotics
Dwayne.
is its own. We've been talking a lot in the last 2 years, 3 years about the explosion, what Elon calls the intelligence explosion, which is largely about AI. But if you combine AI with robotics, which Elon is now doing, then you're talking about a robotics revolution coming out of the intelligence explosion. And that's,
well, you better be teaching your kids.
It's great.
Yeah, computer science and robotics. Jim Garrity, who's coming up next, has kids who go to the robotics competitions and build them. That's a good investment. Let's finish with my alma mater. And you said me, Harvard, bigly as well. I'm so ashamed of my alma mater, I don't know what to say, but what do you think is going to happen here and what is going on?
Well, as you know, the Department of Homeland Security, yesterday, revoked Harvard University's certification to admit foreign students, and they went so far as to allege that Harvard was allowing anti-American pro-terrorist foreigners to harass and physically assault individuals and obstruct its once venerable learning environment. And it went on from there to accuse the university of working with the Chinese Communist Party by hosting and training members of its paramilitary group. This strikes me as beyond ludicrous. It's been U.S. public policy since the end of World War II to attract as much brain power as we possibly can in as many ways as we possibly can. The notion that it's a good idea to enable brain drain strikes me as insane. And when you think about Harvard, the way they talk about Harvard is undergraduates, being woke and taking stupid American history courses and so on and so forth. But there's 6,000, by the way, foreign students have a 20,000 student body, both undergraduate and postgraduate. But the real work at Harvard University takes place in places like the Broad Institute, where George Church, the great geneticist, is doing some of the most important work ever done in genetics, in brain science, in cancer research, etc. And part of the reason that George's Broad Center has been so extraordinarily successful in advancing numerous causes, but most importantly medical science, is because foreign students have come to work with him. So the notion that you don't want those people to go work for George Church at the Broad Institute strikes me as the worst imaginable public policy.
There is a happy solution, John. If they conform to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, more power to them. Let them continue on as they are. But that is what the lawsuit's about, and we'll follow it. John Ellis, thank you. Ellis Items, you can follow him on X at Ellis Items. But you can subscribe to news items by simply, I usually post something every single morning, Monday through Friday, from news items because it is invaluable to start my day with a mixture of news from around the world and reliable, verifiable sources. I'd encourage you to subscribe to news items and to do it soon because there's too much news and you need an editor like John and his team at News Items. Thank you, John. That music means Jim Garrity, the indispensable, is with us. Jim Garrity, you can hear him on most editions of The Editors, the National Review podcast. He also has the Three Martini Lunch podcast, and he does the Morning Jolt. Jim, I want to focus, if I can, on the awful events of Wednesday night. Because I don't know if you've talked about it on The Editors, the episode that dropped, I haven't heard yet. It dropped earlier today, and I haven't had a chance to listen. So I don't know if you were on that episode, and I don't know if it was discussed. Give me your reaction to that, and then I'll ask my follow-up questions about what it portends.
My reaction. White hot rage would be a good way of describing it. Irritation with the liberation and whatever, basically the Socialist Party that this guy was at least a member of in 2017. And their immediate statement of, hey, don't tie him to us. We haven't talked to him in years. Never mind the fact that the party and the publication have been insisting that Israel is committing the world's worst genocide ever and, basically demonizes Jews in every way, shape, or form. Hugh, I don't know about you. I don't believe that anti-Zionists exist. I think that basically that's the code term for people who are anti-Semitic and just don't want to admit it. Because you notice these people keep attacking Hillels on college campuses. They keep attacking JCCs. They keep tearing down menorahs around Hanukkah time. None of those are representatives of the Israeli state. None of those are the Israeli consulate. None of these are the Israeli embassy to the, So in other words, there's an enormous amount of people who say they're just really upset about the policies of the Israeli government, and they just take it out on the nearest Jew that they can find. Hey, guess what? When
so
you do that,
is this? You're too young to remember the '60s. I barely do. I'm in junior high and high school when the violence occurs and Martin Luther King is killed, Bobby Kennedy is killed. I can barely remember the Kennedy assassination, but the bombings in Kent State, 40 minutes from my house, and my cousin was there, so it was kind of embedded in my skull. But do you think we're going there? You think we're in for a spasmodic series of violent events in the United States? The Josh Shapiro arson attack, 2 assassination attempts on Trump. We've got the death of a Jewish man in L.A. at a demonstration. Now we have the murder of 2 Jews just because they're Jews coming out of the Capitol Jewish Museum. What do you think?
By the way, if let's say, I'm pretty sure, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, is Jewish.
Yes.
If somebody had burned down the governor's mansion in Colorado and said, let's say that, they do it because he's Jewish or because he's gay or because they don't like, for whatever reason, do you think that would be a 1 or 2 day story, Q? Do you think that would have disappeared from the news cycle as quickly as the arson? Did significant, but you saw the pictures. They did a significant amount of damage. It was kind of unnerving.
Oh, they could have killed the whole family.
Yeah.
Could have killed the whole family.
So there's the question of are we heading back to the days of rage of the 1970s? I hope not. And I don't think so. But, obviously you can't completely rule it out. I am struck by the fact that, look, there was a really intense protests on campuses on college, in the aftermath of the October 7th attack, throughout that school year. Then a couple of weeks ago in Columbia, they go after the library, and eventually Columbia, I believe Claire Shipman is the new president, calls in the cops. Took 3 or 4 hours, but once they rolled in, they actually arrested him. They cleared them all out. And I know we'll see if Alvin Bragg wants to prosecute them or whether he has to go after really serious crimes like falsified business records from 10 years ago. But the idea is that we'll see that there had been no, in my sense, really dramatic trigger for this guy to go and do it. I think this guy was just a guy who hated Jews and who, if we just he didn't need an event to react to. But now, I noticed
we hold 2 thoughts. I want to anticipate the rebuttal I'm going to get, and I've said it on X already today. I can hold 2 thoughts. I don't know if everyone can, which is that the shooting in Tucson in 2011 that wounded Gabby Giffords, killed a federal judge by a schizophrenic man, and was blamed on Sarah Palin's website, that I can say that's stupid, but at the same time I can say the permission structure for this crazy man was created on scores of campuses and street demonstrations and legacy media. And I don't feel bad about holding both of those opinions. Are they consistent? Do they have to be?
I don't think there's any real problem there. In part because the guy who shot Gabby Giffords was convinced that punctuation was part of an evil conspiracy, that the government was trying to control people through periods and semicolons and things like that. That guy's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? The shooter this past week, apparently, the arrest was caught on video, and he did not seem to be. He seemed remarkably comfortable with himself. And then, of course, he starts yelling, chanting "Free Palestine" as they arrest him. It was, like he did what he came to do. I don't think this guy, as much as he may seem crazy to you or me, I think he is of sound mind, and to him, it was entirely what you're supposed to do. This is he was accomplishing his mission. He was doing what he believed what his purpose in life was, which was to kill Jews in the name of Palestine.
And I forgot to mention in the run-up of events, the same kind of thing happened with Justice Kavanaugh, but the shooter didn't get a chance to get the shot off, right? That's part of this pattern.
Yeah. When there was the guy who blew up the IVF clinic about a week ago, right?
Yeah.
When there is violence on the right wing, there, first of all, if you're blowing people up, you're not really pro-life, right? That's kind of very basic. If the whole purpose of your movement is to preserve life, is to ensure, then you don't get any bonus points for gunning down the abortion doctor, right? Most of us can see that, the kind of consistent application of moral principles. Some nut job comes along and does that, and it's very bad. And everybody on the right denounces it, or everyone on the right should denounce it. But there is no justifiable, in the end, it's really good that you could do this. On the left, going back to the messages of, the folks who were kind of gleeful of, why couldn't the Trump assassin have better aim and all that kind of stuff by congressional staffers, right? I have found, Hugh, that some of the worst behavior I've ever heard comes from, every once in a while from journalists, but often from university campuses, from law firms that are considered, very high end and all that stuff, and remarkably sexist behavior, sexual harassment, crude comments, just the worst treatment of people. I think that the more you're convinced that you are self-righteous, that you stand for the good things in this world, the more you exempt yourself from this is how we need to treat people. That you basically have bought yourself an indulgence over the old church teachings. The idea of because I stand for the right things, I don't have to do the right things. This guy believed that because he was killing Jews, that he's doing a good thing. That it's most people say, oh my goodness, why are you gunning people down in the street as they're coming out of an event? And the answer to him was no, because they're Jews, they're not really people. It doesn't really count. I didn't really commit murder.
And that is where we are this week as we head into Memorial Day. Jim Garrity, thank you. Follow him at Jim Garrity on X. Listen to the podcast, The Editors. Let me say the entire week wasn't a loss. Our sponsors at Job Credit Network put up taxcutsnow.com, and they got it done in concert with Speaker Johnson and everybody else in the Republican caucus who isn't cocoa for Cuckoo Puffs, to use Jim's phrase, because I think Tom Massey is. But I will tell you that Tax Cuts Now is still there. It's still working. Go to it because we got to get the Senate to pass taxcutsnow.com, and they will put you in touch with your two senators if you simply log on to taxcutsnow.com and tell them you want to be a part of the movement to get the reconciliation bill through the Senate to conference and passed and into law so that the tax cuts that we have do not expire. Get our taxcutsnow.com. That music is Zadok the Priest. It's being wasted because I set it up for Charles C.W. Cook. Oh, Charles C.W. Cook gets to hear Zadok the Priest. Charles, when you announced on a previous edition of The Editors that Zadok the Priest was one of your favorite pieces, I confess I'm not a classical music guy. I had to go. When did you develop an appreciation for Zadok the Priest?
Well, actually, I went to school at King's College in Cambridge when I was 6 years old, and they have a famous choir there. And I was exposed to a huge amount of choral music, and that one always stuck with me.
Okay, that's the answer. Charles, I did not hear the new edition of The Editors that dropped this morning. I'll listen to it tomorrow during my trundle. So I don't know if you've covered this already, but I'd like to start with the murder of the two young people in D.C. on Wednesday night. They happened to be Jewish. One was Israeli, one was American, both worked at the Israeli embassy, but they were killed coming out of the Capitol Jewish Museum. There's no way the killer knew who they were, what they were going to do. What was your reaction to this, and what do you think it portends, if anything?
Well, I hope it doesn't portend copycat murders. My reaction to it is that this is unfortunately one more installation in a centuries long history of anti Semitism, and that for it to happen in the capital of the United States, including to an American citizen, is deeply alarming. I am often skeptical of ascribing motives to people who commit atrocities because some of them are crazy and they pick up on the ideology that they're associated with effectively at random or by accident. That is not the case here. This is somebody who was very clearly committed to a hatred of Israel. This was clearly a political act. The perpetrator said as much. And unfortunately, this is one of the oldest problems that the human race faces.
Now, I believe, Charles, that I can hold two thoughts. I just said this to Jim Garrity. I can hold the thought that the Tucson shooting in 2011 of Gabby Giffords and the federal judge and others was wholly unrelated to Sarah Palin's website with the target, as was alleged at the time. And I can also hold that this is clearly influenced by an environment, permission structure is the term, I believe, that has allowed politically violently inclined people to go crazy. And I want to run down the examples. We've got the attempt to kill Kavanaugh, which was very much like this one, only it didn't work. We've got the two shots at Trump. Then we've got the burning down of Shapiro's house, the attacks on Tesla. And of course, the original sin here was the summer of George Floyd, when violence was, if not encouraged, certainly condoned and abetted by acquiescence. I see a pattern. It does remind me of the 60s. Do you think it is?
I certainly think a lot of the examples you just gave are political violence, and that's because the people who committed them said that they were acting in a political manner for political purposes. The Kavanaugh example is a perfect analogy in that he said, I believe, to the police that he wanted to kill Kavanaugh to stop the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Yeah. Now, where I have some squishiness, I suppose, is I don't like it when incidents such as these are used too broadly to condemn or to silence those who have strong political views. That happens on the left, it happens on the right. I'm not a fan of that. But in this case, the closest we've got to the language that he used is the campus protests themselves. I mean, he said, apparently, free Palestine. We've seen at Columbia and elsewhere calls to globalize the Intifada. These are not political disagreements. These are not robust debate within a free republic. Globalize the Intifada means what he just did. He himself associated himself with the Free Palestine movement. So I think in this case and some of the others you mentioned, yeah, it's absolutely fair to link him to ideas that have percolated within the culture.
And I would encourage everyone, we're going to go to a break here, and I'll talk with Charles off air, and then I will bring him back on air afterwards, to go and find the video of Guy Christensen, an 18-year-old extremist, who commented approvingly of these killings, and I think crossed the line, the Brandenburg line, which is pretty hard to cross in America, for good reason. I am, like Charles, not eager to shut down anyone's speech, but I am disturbed by the Guy Christensen TikTok video. He's obviously ignorant and an 18-year-old who doesn't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't know what genocide is, but it was launched by this, and that will in turn launch other things, and we're in a cycle. Talking with Charles C.W. Cook. He has his own podcast, Charles C.W. Cook. He, of course, contributes to the editors at National Review Podcast and writes for National Review. Charles, there was a huge win at the Supreme Court yesterday. It's not complete, but it's huge. Trump v. Wilcox, which stands for the proposition that the executive is in charge of the executive branch. There are no independent agencies, and you can fire without cause everyone who sits on a board. I'm very juiced about this because it kills off Humphrey's executor, the bad interpretation of Humphrey's executor. What do you think about it? It's not final, but it looks very final.
Yeah, it's not final. I'm thrilled about it as well. I think if you read the Constitution is clear in Article 2. It vests all executive power in the president. And it should, because the president is the only member of the executive branch who was elected to take those decisions. If you have a bunch of free floating agencies that are unmoored from the president's authority, then you've created a fourth branch of government. That decision should never have been taken in the 1930s. Now, there are some wrinkles here. The dissent I did not find persuasive. It was clear and undistilled version of progressive governance of the sort you would expect from Elena Kagan. What I do think is interesting is how this implicates other institutions within the executive branch that the public might be less willing to allow the president to exercise full control over. For example, the Federal Reserve. This wasn't the full decision, as you say, this was on the emergency docket. But the decision says, oh, well, we don't have to worry about the Federal Reserve. It doesn't implicate it at the moment because. And then it draws some distinctions between different sorts of agency that I'm not sure I found persuasive. But that wasn't the decision, as you say. So I guess we'll find out how the court deals with that when it comes to it.
If I were Trump, I would roll out with the FTC and the FCC and some of the alphabet agencies and leave the Federal Reserve alone until it is once and truly settled that it's that. The other thing that I like about this is the vindication of Trump's rollout aggressively on every bad precedent stream that's been polluted over the past 30 years. And he's losing some, and that's fine. I want him to lose birthright citizenship because I think he's wrong. But do you approve of the rollout in every direction at once?
Yeah, but more than that, I approve of American politicians taking actions they believe are consistent with the Constitution and in certain circumstances pushing against bad precedent. And we've seen a lot of judges get involved in Trump's presidency early on, more than usual. We have some Trump law in there, and it is appropriate for the Supreme Court to take these issues on an expedited basis, and it's appropriate for the Trump administration, where it thinks it's correct, genuinely thinks it's correct, non-frivolously, to push hard. So, I mean, I'm very pleased about this because I am one of those rare creatures here in the modern world. I'm somebody who thinks that Congress should exercise Congress's power and the president should exercise the president's power. And a lot of the Supreme Court's workload over the last 10 years or so has been dealing with
There are
those
two of
issues.
us. There are two of us, Charles. I'll be right back. We'll start a club. This is my interview with Charles C.W. Cook to end the week, and it's been a big week of news. A lot of it terrible, some of it good, some of it, I don't know. The I don't know category is one big, beautiful bill. And I have some reservations, but I also know it's got to go to the Senate, and then it's got to go to conference. And I also believe in incrementalism, not if you can't get the whole thing, you don't sit it out like Thomas Massey. Charles, I haven't heard your take yet on the one big, beautiful bill. Take your time. Tell us what you love and what you hate.
All right. Well, I don't really like it, although I think much of it is necessary and some of it is good. What I like about it is that it renews the 2017 tax cuts. That's absolutely imperative. Even if you were opposed to the 2017 tax cuts, which some were for various reasons, you should be in favor of this bill. We cannot have the largest tax cut in American history this year. I like the changes to the Medicaid work requirements. I like the focus on defense spending. What I do not like is the restoration of the state and local tax deduction caps. I think that's a disastrous policy. I don't like many of what I see as frivolous giveaways, no taxes on tips, overtime, raise-in deductions for seniors. And I don't like that there is no serious attempt to cut spending. In particular, I don't like that Congress didn't just zero out the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. Now, I will say that I do understand as a practical matter that I don't get to write the tax code and that this is a difficult political game to play, given how narrow the Republicans' majorities are, especially in the House, and given how heavily they are relying for the final yes votes from New York. I've been pretty vocal in my opposition to Mike Lawler from New York's attempt to completely explode the SALT caps. I think some compromise there was necessary. Some compromise on Medicaid was necessary. I do think that it has involved too much compromise with the moderates and not enough seizing of the day. But as I say, I didn't get to write this bill.
Let me throw my one seizing of the day idea at you and see what you think. You remember the BRAC Commission, where a group of appointees from both branches went around, they decided which military bases would be closed, and then it was an up or down vote on what they came up with. What about a BRAC Commission on entitlement reform? Not unlike the Greenspan Commission from the early 80s on Social Security, where you get a group of people to come up with serious entitlement reform. For example, the age of retirement is going to go up 1 month a year for the next 20 years because we're going to live longer,
Right.
so we're not going to retire. What do you think about a BRAC-style approach to entitlement reform? Make them bring it in and vote on it by the end of December 2026.
I'm strongly in favor of doing that. Now, I don't think if we did it next year that it would solve our issues or receive a yes vote, but I do think it would be a good process to start because we are going to have to do this eventually. And the further we kick that can down the road, the worse the situation gets. So I'm totally in favor of doing that, even if you know when embarking on the project that it's going to take 10 years before you get anywhere.
You know, I think you could get it done if you made the changes to entitlements the 30-year change that we did with the government employees pension system moving from defined benefit to defined contribution. That took 30 years to work out. If you do a 30-year entitlement reform, you can get it. I really think you can get it done. And, I mean, we have to get it done, don't we? Or we're going to crash the economy soon.
Oh, yeah. No, we absolutely have to get it done. It's astonishing to me that we've got this far. I hope you're right. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps if you roll it out over 30 years, there would be enough votes for it. I just don't see a great enthusiasm for it in the Republican Party. And I don't see a great enthusiasm for it in President Trump, who ran against entitlement reform as president this time around, and also who told Congress not to screw around too much with even Medicaid, which in part is the product of Obamacare that the Republicans were once vehemently against. But I hope you're right.
I think you could persuade the president that postponed entitlement slowly rolled out would take its time. Charles C.W. Cook, have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Enjoy Florida before it turns muggy and terrible and full of bugs, as is coming your way, but you like it down there. So thank you for joining me this Friday. Have a great long weekend and celebrating our heroes. Thank you, Charles. I want to remind everyone that this is the season where Angel Tree sponsors and we celebrate what they do, which is raise money for kids who have mom and or dad in jail. And when mom and or dad are in jail, they're usually straitened circumstances in the family, and those kids don't get to go to camp. So what Angel Tree does is they ask all of you out there to please send in $200 because that's one camper. And there are too many kids to send them all to camp, but one more kid getting a week in camp is great. Give a listen to Steve Collins of Angel Tree Camp offering reasons on why you should help a child this year.
Because when you invest in the life of a child and you give them an opportunity to experience the reality of who God is and what his love does for their lives, and you pour that investment into that child's life, you're not just reaping benefits this year, but you're changing the course of their life. You've got kids that are growing up and establishing their own families and contributing to society, and you're shaping the future of our nation. And there's no better place to invest your money.
There really is not. And if you want to invest today, go to call. You can use the phone, 888-206-2764, 888-206-2764, or go to HughHewitt.com, and the banner's at the top. Thank you in advance. Don't forget your relief factor. I did 6 miles today, and I'm throwing down my relief factor in the first hour. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, there it is. I do it every day. I got a call today. A little bit of water and it's done. I'm good for the weekend. Long term tomorrow. Got a text today from a friend, a high profile friend. Said, I'm feeling some aches and pains. Does this stuff really work? And I said, oh yes, it really works. Oh, yes, try it. I'm going to get you a free package so that you can give it a try. And I think you're going to say yes. And that 7 out of 10 people keep using it. And the starter pack, by the way, for those of you out there in starter pack land, $19.95. $19.95. All you have to do is call 1-800-4RELIEF. 1-800-4RELIEF. Or go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com, and find the starter pack special offer. You will thank me at the end of the long weekend if you do your Relief Factor order today. Get started. It takes 3 weeks to get the levels up of the anti-inflammatories that are in nature. But it works. It works on this Friday before the long weekend. I'm so glad you're driving home with me. If you're on the early start and you're stuck, I'm sorry. You're probably on your phone. And if you're not driving, don't be driving and be on your phone. Ask yourself, do you know what you're paying for that phone, for your cellular service? Do you have any idea? Because you can have savings without sacrifice on quality if you switch like I did to Consumer Cellular. Consumer Cellular is it's painless to switch. Call 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Or go to consumercellular.com/you and switch. And the easiest thing, if you're a big data user, you get two lines, unlimited data, $60 a month, second month for free if you use my name, Hugh. And that is better than anything Big Cellular is going to offer you. Now, if you're over 50, you probably don't need unlimited data. And if you don't know how much data you use, you can talk to the Consumer Cellular people, and they'll walk you through the right plan for you. You can keep your number, you can keep your contacts, you can keep your everything. Get a new device, do it all. But you got to call them first. And remember, the new customer attraction as well. New customers get a $5 credit on the first 5 monthly invoices. So visit consumercellular.com/Hugh for details. You'll thank me for that. Secondly, I want to tell you about andrewandtodd.com. We closed a loan today, and I just want you to know, even though I don't owe this today, they helped me do it, and I want to say thank you to andrewandtodd.com. They made it so easy. They made it absolutely the easiest thing we have done in a long, long time, and that's because Andrew and Todd know how to get this done. I'm saving the market report until as late in the segment as I can, but I'll go and do it now. Brought to you by American Federal, our friends who buy and sell gold, Nick Grovich and his team. The Dow is down 0.6 points. The S&P is down 0.64 points. The NASDAQ is down about 1%. And gold is feeling good today. It's up almost 2% to $3,359 an ounce. Now, if you bought on the dip, you're a happy person. But I keep telling you, don't try and time the market on gold. Call up Nick Grovich, set up a plan. Maybe you're saying, I'm going to buy gold in 30 days. I'm going to buy gold in a week. So where do I send the money? And let's buy as much gold as you want to put into your portfolio. And price be doggoned. Just forget about the price, because you're not buying gold to trade gold. You're not speculating in gold. You're buying gold to diversify your portfolio, to have some precious metals along with some dirt, along with stocks, bonds, and cash. Very boring, very routine, dollar cost averaging. Do it the same time every month, every quarter, every year for the same amount, and you'll be happy. Unless you've got like a huge purchase. And Nick does handle 7-figure purchases of gold. He can do that. He's been in this business for 42 years. But you can't get anything started until you call AmericanFederal.com. You can visit the website for more information about them, or you can call them at 800-221-7694. 800-221-7694. Tell Nick that Hugh sent you, and you want to talk about getting serious about buying some precious metals. From AmericanFederal.com. It's Friday. That means I'm joined by Ben Domenech, editor-at-large for The Spectator, Fox News contributor, and host of the Big Ben podcast, which I am 3/4 of the way through this week. I've not yet heard any more Indiana Pacers propaganda, but I'm only through John Cornyn. Give me a warning here. Do I have a trigger warning? Am I going to be triggered by this at all, Ben?
You don't have a trigger warning. I challenge the board operator to respond to your demand to fire him and make defense for himself.
So, I'm going to have to listen to the last 15 minutes.
But
I
but
listened to
also put that
Jackie
question-
Heinrich. I listened to Senator Cornyn, and then I was out of miles. I had to turn. I said, for tomorrow morning, I'll find out whether or not that kid's gone. I wanted him gone. He's still there.
Yes,
So-
and I actually put the same question to Guy yesterday. I was guest hosting his show, and his response to me was, on the list of people to be fired from the show, I would not start with him. So that's
All right, Ben, I want to start with you with what you started
Yeah.
the Big Ben podcast with. And I'm going to come to the tragedy on Wednesday night, but I want to start with the gaslighting before we forget the gaslighting. It is now obvious that I was right and you were right and a lot of conservatives were right that Joe Biden was infirm. It is now obvious we can't believe a word out of anyone on Team Biden's mouth. Not a word. There's no reason to believe anything on prostate cancer, on Beau, on Hunter, on anything. There's no reason. Are they ever going to be rehabilitated, or is Biden Inc. out of business?
Well, I believe yes, but I want to add one more point about that, which I'm so glad that Jackie brought up when I was talking to her, which is Joe Biden. We forget this. Joe Biden, obviously, when he was running for president, put out a health report, as people do. And in 2019, he was being treated for an
Prostate
enlarged
enlargement.
prostate then.
Yep.
And that's something that in terms of the context of this whole thing, it makes the whole claim that there was no attention being paid to this for 10 years just absolutely laughable. I mean, if you were being treated for that, you're of course going to get these other tests as well. And that's just something that does not pass the smell test at all. You know, frankly, Hugh, this is what I think. And it's something that has good and bad aspects to it. The frank thing is, I think anyone associated with Biden Inc. is DOA. They are politically not going to be able to be the next leader of the party. They are not going to be able to take things over. They are not going to be the nominee in 28. Anyone associated with this, it's going to be viewed as just, you are associated with a disaster zone. You cannot be trusted. People are going to be asking you questions about this all the way through. We can't run someone like that. The flip side of that is, you know who isn't associated with those things? The young socialists, the rising progressives who are increasingly in polls showing up as the faces of the party. There's a poll that I saw most recently this week that shows both Jasmine Crockett and AOC in the top 3 names of the people who say are the leaders in their party. And that's, you know, a poll that's focused on Democratic voters. So when they are going through the primary process, what that means is, if you do not trust these Biden people, and that includes, of course, you know, Mayor Pete and anybody who was in the cabinet and anybody who was out there defending him vociferously and the like, it means it drives you more and more toward the left, toward the Bernie Sanders left, toward the people who are increasingly more tolerant of the kind of hate that we saw lead to the deaths, tragically, of 2 young, innocent people on the streets of D.C. this week.
That's the bridge I was going to cross. I'm glad you crossed it first, because AOC is associated with that murderer, and I'm sure and I hold 2 thoughts. It was stupid to say that Sarah Palin was connected to the Tucson shootings in 2011, and it is not stupid to say that the permission structure for crazy people to do anti-Semitic violence like that was done on Wednesday night in the Capitol was set up by the entire left-wing inflaming
100%.
machine. It's been going on since the attempt on Brett Kavanaugh, since 2 assassinations attempt on Trump, the Tesla burnings, the Josh Shapiro arson, and now the murder.
Shapiro thing, which people somehow memory hold within the space of weeks. I mean, it's just it's one of these things where that permission structure is absolutely contributing to this directly. It is not. I do not think it's an exaggeration to say that at all, Hugh.
Now, do you know this guy, Christensen guy, this 18-year-old who's got 2 million TikTok followers? Because if you don't, you've got to go.
I know who he is, but I don't know. I mean, I don't really know who he is. He shows up in my stream occasionally. Let's put it.
Well, he did a rant after the murder of these 2 people that essentially calls for more murder. I mean, it's all but calling for more murder. So the younger and stupider you are, the more likely you are to say ridiculously stupid things. And he's 18.
And that's what Josh Kraushaar actually, from Jewish Insider and a longtime, Fox contributor, was pointing out to me when I was guest hosting Guy shows yesterday. He said that what we really find is a generational divide on the Democratic side. That if you are an elder millennial, a Gen Xer, et cetera, you are averse to this. You find it to be unacceptable. But if you are a Gen Zer, this is something that is just, you don't find it problematic at all. And to me, that's an indictment of their own side, that they haven't policed their own side. They haven't, done anything to prevent them from doing this. And, from my perspective, that means that they're scared of them on some level, which is ridiculous. These people are cowards and they're animals, and they are, ridiculous in their claims. They're ahistorical, and they also are people who are frankly given to the kinds of activities that lend one and send people into these aggressive scenarios where they somehow think in their mind process that going to a fairly apolitical Jewish professional event happening in Washington, D.C., flying from Chicago, as this shooter did, checking his gun at the airport in order to bring it into D.C. to shoot two random people on the streets a stone's throw from the White House who just happened to be Jewish. 21 times he fired at them. He reloaded, okay? This is the most evil thing that you can conceive of, okay? And that's something that he is driven to by this type of rhetoric and this type of permission structure, as you mentioned.
Now, Ben, are you at all worried? They're going to go for the death penalty, and I'm glad, because that gives the murderer a chance to plead guilty to 2 first-degree counts of murder for life imprisonment off to supermax with him. But if you don't go for the death penalty, there's no incentive to bargain. But I'm afraid of D.C. juries. I really am. I do not know that they'll convict him. Does jury nullification or mistrial worry you at all?
It does. I think you're right to be concerned about that. I am as well. But I do think that you have to go this route, and I think that it's I think that it's likely to end up in terms of the situation in a plea, just because it's just so clear cut. The evidence is so heavy. And the other thing that I do think is significant about this, and I think it's underrated, is Muriel Bowser is not a smart politician, but she knows which side of the bread is being buttered right now. She is indebted to Donald Trump for doing a lot of things and Republicans, by the way, particularly on the House side, for greasing the skids for the stadium deal and everything else that she wants to have happen, that she wants to be her legacy. She does not want her legacy to be the period of the summer of Floyd and everything like that. And so as a politician, I think she understands, and it's one of the reasons why I think she's been fairly good in the press conferences about this. And so because of that, I think that we're in, this is as good of a situation that you could possibly.
Oh, we lost Ben. What happened to Ben? I don't hear him. Hello, Ben. I've just lost him. Is he still talking? Yeah, I think his phone dropped. We'll call him back, and that's okay. In the meantime, let me tell you, taxcutsnow.com, one of the great, and now I'm tied up with my own audio, one of the great sponsors of the program is the Job Creators Network, and they are running taxcutsnow.com through all of the reconciliation process. Now, all those sites are on the Senate trying to say, hey, guys, let's get this into focus. Let's finish the job, and they will. Ben is back. Ben, I'm going to go to break with you, and I'm going to get your hot take to tease people into the break. Are you happy with the One Big Beautiful Bill?
I'm not. I think I agree with a lot of the fiscal hawks, even fiscally reasonable folks in the Senate side. I think there are a lot of changes that need to happen to it before.
I heard Senator Cornyn reserve the right with you that the Senate was going to have its bite at the apple, and we will look for that. I didn't know, by the way, that your first gig in town was with Senator Cornyn. Great man to start with. Ridiculous primary charge. I got nothing against the Attorney General, but what a waste of time and money. John Cornyn, it's a safe seat. Why in the world would we put one into play? I hope the president brings the hammer down on General Paxton. I don't know that he will. Ben, I do love knowing the stories of people's first gigs in Washington. I didn't know you started out with John Cornyn. How did that happen? And what a great choice. It's like when my son first came to D.C., I said, go to work for John Kyle. He's a really smart, good guy. How'd you end up with Cornyn? Same thing.
So actually, I will a slight adjustment. It was my first gig on Capitol Hill. So I had actually gone from the White House speechwriting office as an intern researcher, and then they sent me over to work for Tommy Thompson for about 8 months, which was great because I got to meet Bobby Jindal, and that relationship has continued to this day. Back then, he was just such an upstart. I got to see that whole thing play out back behind the scenes. But then I got my real first serious gig with John Cornyn as his chief speechwriter as a youngster, and he was a newbie to legislative policy and everything like that. He got a recommendation from one of the folks over on the White House side, and decided to take me on. And as a junior guy, really young going in there, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was surrounded by a group of staffers that was mostly holdovers from Phil Gramm. And so that really made it an educational experience of here's the senator is new to town, learning about this whole place, and so am I. And so it was a real good thing.
Now he's got seniority on the major committees, and I really do not understand Ken Paxton. He's vulnerable, so it means at best case we'd have to spend $1 billion we don't otherwise have to spend if you're a Republican. But he could lose.
Wait, so can I ask first? This is the podcast portion, correct?
Yes.
Hugh. Okay. The thing with Ken is that he's an a-hole.
I've only met him once. He wasn't to me, but I just know that he's got problems. But he could lose.
Ken is a very divisive person in terms of his experience in Texas. And you don't have to ask. Even people who like Ken, I think, will admit that. And the truth is that there is no love lost between him and John Cornyn. But John is kind of he's like a patrician, old school politician in his manner. His voting record is actually extremely conservative.
He told you 99.2% with Trump.
I mean, the only break that he's had really with the right in Texas is that he pushed for some gun reforms after the shootings that happened in Texas, and they didn't like some of them. Those reforms, were obviously supported by a number of other Republicans as well in the Senate. And so it's one of these things where that issue is going to be part of what Paxton seizes on. Paxton is a purely transactional politician in terms of his approach, and I think that he's just going to lean into the idea that I will be even more vociferous. And he also has leaned into the idea that every kind of thing that's been done to him, including an attempt at removing him from office, going after him for all these other things, are things that make him like a Texas version of Trump. Personally, I'm not
buying that. It's like a Texas version of 2020. That means you don't have to play around. We don't need to dance on the cliff in Texas. It's a safe seat. They got seniority. They should stick with it. Ben, I want to turn to something that occurred to me in the aftermath of the murder of the youngsters at the Capitol Jewish Museum, which is Israel's losing friends all over the world. Crazies are rising. We really need Michael Waltz to get up to the UN. And I think Americans forget that senators can make speeches on the floor and they don't get near the attention of our UN ambassador abroad. Mm-hmm. Do you think we need to accelerate that?
I think we absolutely need to. And one of the reasons is I think that Bibi Netanyahu should not have been the one calling out this week the actions of Keir Starmer and of Emmanuel Macron. I think that we needed to have Mike Waltz doing that from the floor of the UN. I mean, this is not a situation where we should have our titular friends going out there and essentially saying that Israel is going too far. This could be over if the hostages were released. It's not something that needs to continue if that happened, but it's not happening because Hamas is locked into this, and it's only going to be deterred by what Bibi wants to do. And I truly believe that. And look, I understand that this is a complicated situation, but when it comes to the moral side of this argument, it's not complicated.
It's not. It's 10-7 and the after effects. That's it. Let the hostages go when it gets complicated, but not yet. Okay, I want to close by talking about the courts and the Trump strategy, which was vindicated yesterday with the decision in U.S. v. Wilcox, which is not a completely final decision on the merits, but close enough for court guessing. They're going to uphold the right of the president to remove every board member of every independent agency, and they can distinguish the Federal Reserve. So that means the FTC, the FCC, the NLRB, the MSPB, all these alphabet agencies. All of a sudden, the president could be able to fire everyone. Now, a Democrat gets elected, same rules going to be applied. All the Republicans are going to get fired. But what do you think of that, and what do you think it does in vindicating the Trump legal strategy of attack in all directions at once?
I think it's a huge win, don't you? I mean, this is one of those things where, look, he came in with a mindset that was far more aggressive than what the traditional Republican legal establishment would have, favored. It's one that's, something that has been an element of that conversation, but has not been the dominant one for a while. And he's won with it. And that, to me, is just, I think it's something that is significant and is going to, reap some rewards in terms of control. And it's also an understanding, I think, that this type of thing was going to play out at some point anyway, and it's better to happen under a Republican president where you can actually get some stuff done.
And with a guy like John Sauer, who has proven to be a very, very effective Solicitor General. And when I was at Justice, they would always have a Friday morning meeting when the SG would always report on which ones he was going to seek cert on. And Rexley was pretty aggressive, but it was not a originalist court. This is an originalist court. We don't know how long we have it. Go and fix the bad precedents. And so
you have to maximize these things. You cannot just sort of sit around and say, "Oh, isn't it nice to have it?" No, you have to make use of it.
So in terms of the Trump first 4 months, which is what we're coming up to now, what do you think? How do you grade him?
Look, I think he's been too chaotic when it comes to the tariff side of things. And I'll start with the negative. I think that there was a way to do this that would have been a little more predictable and scared fewer people and lost in fewer people. But here's one of the things I have to point out. His polling numbers are increasingly up, and there's an enormous support for his immigration agenda. And there's belief that and confidence among his supporters that the economic side of things is going to be something that continues to improve. I think he's done extremely well. I think he's been shockingly speedy in terms of what he's done. He's shifted the conversation in so many ways around the world in a way that benefits us. Look, I have some qualms about some of the things that he's done, but overall, I think this is I give this an A. I mean, I think this is an incredible performance, especially compared, and people forget, to the chaos that ensued in his first term almost from the get-go. Instead, I think he's actually had a relatively, people will paint it somewhere else, but it's like, other than Signalgate, other than the problems that resulted from that communications fiasco with Jeff Goldberg, I really think that this has been a much more well-organized and well-honed approach to taking on as many enemies as possible as solidly as he can. And this week on Capitol Hill, he showed his power. I mean, he brought the House Freedom Caucus to heel in the space of less than 36 hours.
And I point out, he's raised $600 million already.
Yes.
He's going to spend that for his agenda. He's going to spend that for MAGA.
He understands how important the midterms are, too. That's an incredible thing, frankly, for Republicans going forward.
I noticed that you were a little skeptical in your conversation with Cornyn that we're going to lose the House. I kind of view it as the title charts of American politics that we lose the House. But $600 million is a lot of money. And if they do entitlement reform, even whisper about entitlement reform, they'll bring everyone together.
I think this is one of these things that it's one of these things where Washington zigs and I tend to zag. where when the conventional wisdom is all going in one direction, I tend to take the under. But I do think that there is a conceivable situation where Republicans actually do go into these midterms in a better position than they perhaps thought they would be. And in part, I think that's because Democrats have a real problem with the conflict that is happening between the young left and the old Democrats. We saw, Jerry Connolly, R.I.P., pass away this week. The conflict that happened within that is kind of a microcosm of what's going on with David Hogg and everybody else. There is this appetite for a radical leftism that they have that I think the American people are just not interested in. They are not interested in that.
A suggestion for the Big Ben podcast. David Mamet has a new book coming out. He's going to be on the show when I get back from vacation, called The Disenlightenment. It is the most brutal takedown of the Democratic Party's transformation into a series of discrete radical groups that have coalesced in order for electoral
if you can
advantage.
get me an interview with David Mamet, I will buy you a steak dinner at any
That's
restaurant
easy to
of your
do.
choice.
He likes to talk to smart people who've read the book. That's his secret. If you've read the book, and The Disenlightenment is sort of like cheesecake. You can't read it in one sitting. You got to read it like 30 pages at a time. But he's amazing.
Oh well, my gosh! No, I'm you don't know this about me, Hugh, but I am a huge Mamet fan. I believe I have all of his books. In fact, so
okay. Well, that's a deal. I will get on Danielle right now because he loves to talk with smart people who've actually done the reading, and you'll love The Disenlightenment. But I'll ask him to send it to you fairly quickly. He's been a guest fairly regularly because when I was on the West Coast, I'd run into him. Not a friend, but a good guest, a good radio friend. Ben Domenech, have a great
the relaunch of Glengarry on Broadway yet, but I did walk past it and meet Bob Odenkirk.
No coffee for closers. I used it on Fox the morning that the president was going up there. No coffee for closers. Coffee is for closers. That's it. Coffee is for closers. Ben Domenech, thank you. Follow him on X at B Domenech. Like and subscribe to Big Ben. It's a great new podcast. You're going to love it, but I got to go listen to the end part about the Indiana Pacers because I got to take it up with Guy. You can't have a Pacers fan producing national radio. It's been more than 2 months since my guest, Eli Lake of the Free Press and host of the Breaking History podcast, authored the podcast Luigi Mangione and the History of Bourgeois Terrorism. So I haven't listened to it in probably 10 weeks, Eli, but it came to mind after Wednesday night's horrific murder of the young Jewish couple at the Capitol Jewish Museum. And the murder of the healthcare executive, the attack on Ben Shapiro's house, the Tesla terrorism, 2 assassination attempts on Trump. We've got the attempt to kill Brett Kavanaugh, that not unlike what happened Wednesday night, but it didn't work. I just think, I've said we're not in the 60s forever, but maybe we are. What do you think?
Well, there is a difference, and that is that you needed a real network in the 1960s and 1970s to kind of conduct terrorism. And you don't necessarily need that today because radicalization, as we learned in the War on Terror, or towards, I should say, the end of the War on Terror, or at least into the War on Terror, 10 years in, that you can become a walking smart bomb. You can become a radicalized killer by just absorbing things online. You don't need somebody to bring you into a group of people. You don't need to, if you look at the history of the Weather Underground, they had struggle sessions that were modeled in many ways on Stalin's and Mao's, almost kind of the ability to psychologically break down individuals in a group. The new model that you could say was developed by ISIS more than 10 years ago is to simply put out this kind of poison, and somebody will, not everybody who encounters it or who is part of the cause will become a terrorist, but all you need is a few, and that's what we just saw.
Eli, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with? Oh no, I hear you perfectly. I don't know if you're familiar with Guy Christensen. He's an 18-year-old TikToker who was interviewed by the World Socialist website, and then yesterday put out a TikTok 2-minute, actually it's a 6-minute hate fest, basically calling on other people to murder other Jews and other Zionists. And he's 18 years old, and he's stupid. And I mean, he reveals that he's stupid, but he's very passionate. He's wearing keffiyeh, and I went back and found an interview. I do think radicalization is accelerating, and I don't know how to slow it down. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, there are not a lot of really good options. What we've seen, and we have to grapple with this because I obviously have an interest in slowing the spread of this hate, is that when you empower social media companies with ways to throttle and prevent speech online, that is almost always a power that is abused. So it started off, if you can remember, the content moderators at places like Twitter 10 years ago, there wasn't much of a controversy. You couldn't post ISIS and Al Qaeda snuff videos, and I don't think you still can. Then, after the 2016 election, there was a moral panic about Russia, and suddenly there was a push to prevent Russian disinformation. And then, after COVID, there was a push to prevent medical disinformation. And what we saw in all of these cases, and particularly after the 2020 election, were that people who had legitimate points were still caught up in this sort of censorship complex. And so after Elon Musk bought Twitter, many people were sort of brought back. But my concern is that, I don't necessarily trust the speech police, whether at a social media company or, God forbid, the government, as we both know, that would be in many ways getting into First Amendment grounds. So it is a very, very difficult thing. I mean, I don't know, but I guess one thing I would say is that we need to deal with a deeper rot within our education system. What we've seen, if you look at some of these stories about Qatari money that not only goes to universities, it also goes to secondary schools, in some cases, middle schools and earlier, is you have to sort of say, wait a second, the people who are in charge of our broader education, not just our elite education, are pushing a kind of indoctrination. So that's one place
You
to look.
worry much more about the Qataris than I do, but both the kingdom and the Qataris gave money to the Nixon Library, and I've always understood that they were the designated home base where everyone could meet. I've never understood them to be actively involved. Let's talk about it during the break and come back on the other. I've never understood them to be actively pushing the Al Qaeda agenda so much as being ollie in free, where the terrorists can sit down with Israel and Netanyahu can do a deal with Hamas. About the Qataris, I always disclose. I'm on the board of the Nixon Library. We took money from the kingdom. We took money from the Qataris, and they're not allowed to influence programming. It's a bright line. You can't have anything. You can build us a building and we'll put your name on it because Nixon opened the embassy there 50 years ago, but you can't have anything to do with programming. And that's fine with them. Do you think they're trying to run an influence operation on kids about jihadism?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's not. We should always resist mono causes because I think in some ways they're pushing on open doors when you're talking about the education establishment right now, and some of that's just pure ideological stuff, which is to say that ideas that have been discarded in the broader discourse have really kind of taken hold and are not questioned when you're talking about the institutions that train teachers in our country right now, and these are people who have taken a great deal to sort of push concepts like anti-racism and so forth, which may not seem to have anything to do with Jews, except that when the rubber hits the road on these university campuses, what have we seen? That we have all kinds of rules against microaggressions and all these other groups that can't be offended, except if you're a Jewish student, you say, I don't feel safe. And I'm not saying that comes from nowhere. Now, as for the Qataris, it's vast. I would not. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily trying to influence the Nixon Center, or the Nixon Library, as you say. But what we do know is that the government of Qatar, after October 7th, the prime minister and the foreign ministry basically praised it as a heroic act of resistance. They sounded no different than what you would expect to hear on Al Jazeera, which also the Qataris fund and created. So I am worried about the influence of Qatar, but I also think sometimes it can be overstated. Jay Solomon and Franny Block for the Free Press wrote a really excellent, comprehensive piece of journalism that looked at all of the investments that Qatar has made, which is pretty staggering.
Did they can deal? Because I went over and sat down with the ambassador from Qatar, and I've sat down with the ambassador of UAE as well. I'll talk to anybody, but I was told Bibi wanted Qatar to host Hamas. Is that true?
Well, first of all, it's yes and no. Yes, Bibi after I think it was the 2014 Gaza war. And by the way, the entire international community, starting with the Obama administration, had a conundrum, which is Hamas remains in power in Gaza, and they did not want to say that we're not going to try to reconstruct this area. So it all had to go through Gaza, and there was one country that was certainly willing to deliver that funding. And I think Netanyahu saw this as a way of putting the conflict, he was dead wrong, on ice. So yes, it's true that Netanyahu kind of supported Qatar kind of stepping in and funding Hamas, and one of the reasons that he supported is because there was really no other country willing to get their hands dirty with Hamas, or more respectable country or more respectable kinds of funds. But obviously that proved to be a mistake. But it's a fair point to make.
Eli Lake is the host of the Breaking History podcast. He's a columnist for the Free Press. I think everyone should subscribe to the Free Press, just like I think everyone should subscribe to Commentary, because they both defend the West, and there aren't enough publications that are serious and do that. I want to conclude by asking you, Eli, the acceleration of violence alarms me. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Do you think Jews ought to be more afraid than they are right now? Because I'm still astonished that there were not security guards outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum.
Well, fear is a tricky emotion, but the way I see it is that there is inspiration to be gleaned from Jewish history. I think now is a time to study a concept that was developed by Zev Jabotinsky and Menachem Begin called Hadar. And that is a kind of combination of both pride, but honoring a kind of sort of Jewish idea that you are not going to walk through the world kind of, ashamed of your identity, and you're going to be proud of it. And you're also going to learn how to defend yourself. I would say at this point, that I don't think, I don't support obviously any kind of vigilante justice, but I do think that Jews should consider their sort of at least cultural aversion to owning handguns and taking advantage of the Second Amendment at this point. And so that's part of it. I think the other part is that you're going to see it's almost a social tax, but it's also a very real tax on security for Jewish institutions. And events
Yes.
like this, you're right. I mean, and it's deeply unfair, but I mean, I just think that leading the way should be Jewish organizations and Jewish people should sort of say, you know what, I don't want to make you feel comfortable. I think this is despicable what you're accusing Israel of, which is a kind of blood libel, which in some cases will inspire these kinds of individuals. We should say we don't know in the case of Elias Rodriguez that whether he worked with someone or not, but I do think that chances are that he was probably somebody who was radicalized, like this Aaron Bushnell and others.
Well, we're going to find out. Now, here's my last
Yeah,
question.
we're gonna
We don't
find
have
out.
anyone at the
Okay.
UN, and France, England, and Canada are attacking Israel. And this is a time when we need an ambassador to the UN to stand up in that forum and say, stop. Do you think we have to accelerate or put in priority pole position Michael Waltz's nomination?
I think so. I mean, it's unfortunate that Elise Stefanik, because of the numbers in the House, couldn't do it, because I think she would have been terrific. But we need Walz to channel Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Jean Kirkpatrick and the strong American representatives in that nest of vipers.
I think he's got the chops. I mean, he's been in
Yeah, no, I'm not saying he
gunfights
doesn't. I'm
with the
just saying,
Taliban. Yeah, I think
absolutely.
he
No,
can
I
speak
know
from
he has the
experience.
chops. I'm just saying I know he has the chops, but we need is somebody. And I've talked to Mike Waltz before, so I don't want to. I'm not in any way diminishing that. What I'm saying is it's such an important position right now. What you need is a really strong advocate for Western values in that institution.
Amen. And the sooner the better, because we're empty. We got an empty chair. And when stuff like what is happening happens, okay, I got time for a bonus question, Eli. I would think
Yes.
Israel has to strike Iran within the next 6 to 8 weeks. I think that has to happen. What do you think?
I do not understand why it hasn't happened yet. My hope is that the Trump administration will cooperate and let Israel take the lead, and then try to handle the diplomatic blowback and possible mid-air refueling and other sorts of things. And I think that there's been a way to sort of make this point to Trump, which is to say the Iranians can always negotiate after you take out these facilities
Good
as
point.
well.
Good point. And I just think it's time, and I want the American people to realize we're out of time,
Absolutely.
and we got to do this. Eli Lake, follow him on X at Eli Lake. Listen to Breaking History. Go back and get the Luigi Mangione and the rise of bourgeois terrorism episode from March 17th. Thank you, Eli. I want to tell everyone that we are in the middle of our campaign for Angel Tree, and I want to remind you that the banner for Angel Tree camps for summer kids, for Angel Tree summer camps for kids whose mom and or dad, sometimes it's both parents, are incarcerated, are vital to the health and well-being of these children. They get a week away with counselors who love on them, teach them scripture, teach them that there is a God that cares about them, and lets them have water balloon fights and shaving cream fights and bunkhouse raids and mosquito bites and poison ivy and everything else that happens at summer camp, the good and the bad, that people don't ever forget because it's unique in the life of a 7 to 12-year-old. And Angel Tree will take as many as can be raised money for. And it costs $200 to scholarship a kid to Angel Tree. You can do it one of two ways. You can head over to hughhewitt.com and find the banner at the top, or you can simply call the number of Angel Tree, which I'm looking for very quickly right now, 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you'll see their ad, and it's classic camp stuff. And you really want to go with that. It's fabulous. So please be as generous as you can heading into Memorial Day weekend. Maybe you can only do a half scholarship. Maybe you can do 5. Whatever you can do, God bless you. Also want to remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. And if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I'm holding up the old bag. The new bag is better looking, but I always did like the North Carolina blue and the green. Relief Factor keeps me going. Did my 6 miles this morning. Going to go longer tomorrow morning. The weather's kind of nice in the Beltway for a change. And I'll be able to do that and then spend the whole weekend with the whole family is in town, baptism weekend. And we're looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if I do a long trundle in the morning, by the time that we have a long Sunday ahead with the baptism and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be fabulous to feel good and not achy and not feeling the aches and pains of a long trundle. Icarian and curcumin is resveratrol and omega. They combine to help your body's anti-inflammatory system support you as you get older and as you exercise, and especially as you exercise as you get older. Now, I've been using it for more than 10 years. It's the only supplement I've ever taken. It's the only supplement I've taken for 20 years. I shouldn't say forever. I tried one once. I didn't like it, and I just stopped it more than 20 years ago. And when Relief Factor came around, I did a lot of research, did a lot of talking to my doctor, and they said, oh, yeah, those 4 supplements are good. They're real. You can go get them at GNC, and I don't want to go get them at GNC because then I'm going to have to measure them and all that stuff. I let Relief Factor worry about the dosage, and I pay the fee, and I think it's probably cheaper than the GNC stuff. Go and get ReliefFactor.com. Try it. 3-week, $19.95. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF. Or go to their website, ReliefFactor.com. Find the starter pack offer and hit that button at ReliefFactor.com. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe, is in the house. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. This is Joe from Tarzana, the home of spotty Wi-Fi. I hope we can talk this week without interruption. If you've never read Inferno from the Comedy Divine, you may have heard the circles down in Hades number 9. The deeper you descend, the more intense the pain is, fitting as a punishment for crimes that are more heinous. I don't have skills like Dante, as anyone can tell. However, let me conjure up a 10th circle of hell. The 9th is for betrayers of their mentors. Think of Brutus, or even of divinity, who joins him there but Judas. But we need a deeper circle, another place to fall for the staffers and the pundits who betrayed us one and all. And sadder, even sadder in this tragedy's portrayal, are the once respected voices who succumbed to self-betrayal. They built a reputation so their programs could be trusted. In the service of deception, reputation busted. It profits a man nothing to sell their soul for dough, But what I'll never understand, they lost it all for Joe. They may pretend they're moving on, they may try not to show it, but when you're in Inferno, believe me, friend, you know it. That's Inferno number 10 by Tarzana Joe.
You got to set that to music, Joe, because Inferno number 10 sounds like an orchestral score. Brilliantly done in reference to
There's only
everything
one place
about-
lower.
Gaslighting has been pretty intense the last 4 years. Joe, how is business as we go into Memorial Day in the poetry world?
It's never ending. I send a poem out and a new request comes in. I don't know how that works, but the universe is keeping me busy.
Well, I'm interested about, do you ever intend to retire as the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, or even after the Hugh Hewitt Show retires, as the poet laureate of the country?
What what fulfills me the most is when I get a call from a dad or a mom who's, I'm on daughter number 3 and I need another toast for the wedding. They come back to Tarzana Joe. That is always touching when I know I've made a contribution.
Yeah, you know that people weren't shining you on when they said they really loved it when they come back a second time. If you need a poem for any occasion, a retirement, a wedding, a farewell, a graduation, or just a poem for your beloved, write to Joe, TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com, TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com, and Inferno number 10 will be posted at TarzanaJoe.com soon, I think. Joe, thank you.
Right now. Thank you.
Right now. You're welcome. Hey, thank you, Harley Adam and Generalissimo. Stay tuned, everyone. Hour number 3, the Hillsdale Dialogue, this week with Dean Matt Spaulding. We'll talk about the murder in D.C. yesterday, but we'll also get back to talking about the 250th birthday cycle that we are in for the country.